Hi, and welcome to The Curling Show, the podcast that brings you interviews with the sport's top athletes and the people who shape the game. Brought to you by Local 59 and their line of steel furniture. See it at local59.com. I'm your host, Dean Gemmel, and this edition offers the first half of a two-part interview with one of the most popular tour curlers and a fine example of friendly Manitoba, Jon Mead. Hi, Jon. Thanks for joining us on the show today. I know you have a pretty busy schedule, so I really appreciate your time. Let's start by talking about last season in your team. Scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate it?
I probably a 5.
5, just because.
Well, I would take the average. We had moments in time last year where we were as good as we could hope to be, and then we had moments on the other side of it where we were about as bad as we could be, and. What we've been over the years is normally a pretty consistent team, and last year we were at the other end of the spectrum with that, and never quite knew what we were going to get going into a weekend. So, we missed a lot of weekends in bonspiels. We didn't qualify a lot, but we won a couple big ones too. So, it's
right.
It's just the way it was.
You talk about consistency, and your team was one of the first to turn that trial spot. Did that make last year feel a little bit like something to get through before this year?
Maybe a little bit. I think for us, what we did last year, and I hate to draw the analogy because people, as soon as I say something like this, people think, oh, he thinks he's as good as Tiger Woods, and that's not. But what we did was winning the trial spot 2 years ago really gave us the luxury last year to tinker with stuff and to try some different things and work on some small stuff without having to worry about the end. We didn't have to worry about winning anything specifically last year, so we didn't have to curl as much. We could pick our spots. I know that, for example, I really broke down some things that I was doing on how I was throwing the rock, and for a while, I really struggled. So, we went through that kind of retooling thing that you hear some of these other teams and athletes talk about, and it was going to be some short-term pain, hopefully for long-term gain, and, it showed at times that things were improving.
That's interesting. So you were actually trying to work on specific changes in how you're delivering the rock?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the day that I think that I'm throwing it as well as I can is probably the day that I quit. So, or that I should quit, anyways. So yeah, all of us are constantly playing with equipment or changing release points or slide paths or whatever the case may be. So yeah, it was really a year to play around with things and try different things, and all in the goal to be as good as we can be this fall.
Talking about deliveries for a minute, let's talk about the Manitoba Tuck. What advantages do you think that delivery has over the balanced delivery?
In this day and age, with equipment being what it is, I don't think the advantages, have to be real big. But I do think that there's certain things that the Tuck has available to them that a flat foot or balanced delivery doesn't have. I mean, first off, the balanced delivery is great until you lose your balance. It's tough when especially for smaller players, and girls and such that that are smaller, where they may have a hard time throwing it hard. You do tend to lose your balance, and then with the balanced delivery, it's very difficult to regain your balance in a short period of time. Whereas with Tuck, you've got that extra point of pressure with your hand resting so hard on the broom. I've got my foot, I've got the broom, I've got my trailing leg, and just that forward position where you can sort of launch onto your leg. If you do lose your balance when you slide Tuck, you have a lot more ability to adjust and get your balance back. The thing that the Tucks probably generally struggle with on the flip side of that is that you have a tendency to slide low and you can lose your perspective on speed, and as a result, a lot of Tuckers, especially when they're younger, can struggle with draw weight a little bit consistency-wise, and I think that there's a way for both sides of it with equipment and just technique to make it so that the differences are negligible. But I think those are the differences between the two slides that you see.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we often think of Tuckers as good hitters as well, probably better hitters. Why do you think it's stuck so much in Manitoba, though? I sometimes wonder if there aren't some Curl Canada instructors from the early 80s kidnapped and held in Selkirk or something. Why so particular to Manitoba? I think it's one of the most interesting things. I personally love that that's the way it is, but I just wonder why you think it's stuck particularly in your province.
Well, I think, number one, the Curl Canada coaches at the beginning just had a hard time figuring out how to get out to Manitoba. No, I'm just kidding. Well, it's like anything. I mean, you look all across the country and people try to emulate their heroes or their idols or whatever. And, growing up here, you had the Jeff Stoughtons and the Kerry Birdnicks and guys like that. So I went out and emulated them and Vic Peters. And so you still see people, that's who they want to cheer for, those guys, and that's who is doing it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see lots of teams out in Alberta where where the third man is calling the game and the skip's is sweeping. So I think it's just that's the way that it's been, and the people coming up are gravitating to those teams that, and in Manitoba, it's been a fairly consistent pattern that the guys that are Slide and Tuck have had, the more success, on a more regular basis. So, the Manitoba kids are trying to follow up on that.
You're a guy who's played third pretty consistently. What do you like about the position? Why do you think you're well suited for it?
I think my personality, first off, is sort of suited to that. Well, I guess it depends who you talk to, but I don't feel, I don't necessarily want to be the guy in the limelight all the time. You take both sides of that. When you're a skip, you get all the glory, but you also get all the, you're the guy that's on the front page of the paper when you gack. So, I'm pretty happy, letting somebody else have that. I also like, I like the exercise part of the sweeping. I've always enjoyed that. I like the flexibility, the shots, that you get to play all the different things, and it's all I've known. I mean, that's all I've really ever played. So, I'd be, it's not like I wouldn't consider playing other positions. It's just always been where I've been and the opportunities that I've had to play that position. So, I have, and I certainly have no aspirations to skip because, if I'm skipping, it means I'm not playing with the team that I'm playing with right now, which means I'm not playing with as good a team. So
I've always thought the third is the conduit there between the skip and the front end, and there is a unique personality, I think, that works well with it. What about the Safeway Select the last couple of years? Hasn't been the greatest for you guys. What do you think's happened? Has it just been that there's a lot of depth in Manitoba and you run into certain teams, or has it just been off weeks? Or
I guess we're a little bit victim of having the success that we've had, and that people sort of expect us to, walk through it. If you actually look at what we did, 2 years ago, we lost the final
right
in a game that, if we look back on it, I mean, take nothing away from the Brent Scales team, but, we had a chance to put the last rock in our own hand in a tie game, and we kind of, we screwed the pooch a bit on that one, and let it get away from us. So very arguably 2 years ago, we had every right to win that Select that year. And then, last year we were going along pretty well and came out a little flat against, Randy Dutain, one game where they played just awesome, take nothing away from them, and then had a shot to win in to get to Sunday and have to win 2 games. We had a shot to win that game and we missed it. I mean, those things happen. The format is somewhat, in Manitoba, is very well suited to those kinds of things happening with a double knockout. You're never far away from being out, and that's a big part of it. And there's lots of teams, it's not like going somewhere else where you haven't played somebody before and they get maybe a little intimidated by the name Jeff Stoughton. I mean, a guy like Randy Dutain or Ryan Fye or Kerry Burtnick or Scott McFadden, these guys have played us so many times that there's absolutely, they're not afraid of us or not concerned about playing us in the least bit. Whereas if we're playing, somebody that, we haven't heard of outside of Manitoba, but we're playing in Ontario, maybe for the first time there is a little bit of a, I've only seen these guys on TV kind of deal, and, they're just good teams, and that's what makes the Select a great event.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the depth in your province, too. I mean, I think what a lot of curling fans don't realize is that, a team like yours will beat certain teams the majority of the time, but there are plenty of teams that can beat you on any given day, so... And it's a funny game at times. And, let's talk a little bit about the MCA and the Select format. I know you guys have been at odds with the powers that be there a little bit on it. How would you like to see it changed, or what would you like to see happen to it?
Well, I sort of have mixed feelings. One of the problems that I have with the Select format, and for the most part, let me preface it by saying I think the MCA has generally been one of the most progressive, thoughtful, and understanding associations that we deal with. They constantly are seeking real feedback from the players on ways to improve things. I mean, you look at the ice conditions, you look at the the sponsor issues on the ice with us being able to wear cresting, and they are constantly looking at ways to address player concerns. So that's been a really good part of the Select. Certainly the format, there aren't many of the top teams out there that like double knockouts. It's just the nature of the beast. I mean, you lose your first game in an event like that, you've got to win 4 or 5 in a row just to get back into it. Now they fixed it and it was double-double. But we're now back in a format where you could win all your games and play a team in the final that's lost 2 games. You lose that 1 game, you're out. And, there's certain amount of, that can be a tough pill to swallow at times. I mean, that essentially happened to us 2 years ago. But, again, it is what it is. I think the biggest concern I have, and where Manitoba, our format hurts our province, is that for new teams coming up that want to break through, the round robin, I think, does a lot more to generate experience in that, the guys that are, say, in Ontario, they go to a provincial, their first provincial, and they play 8 or 9 games, and they might go 1-8 or 2-7 or something like that. But they get some valuable experience. The problem with the Select is that it's really geared to the top teams in that we know what to expect. So a team that comes out day one, plays their first game, they're playing Kerry Burnick or whoever the case may be, and they get their ass whooped. And they're down on one leg. They play somebody else. They're out before they even hit the banquet.
Right.
And they've got very little in terms of real on-ice experience. They like to come back, but they really haven't learned how to win in that environment. So, for the top teams, it becomes a bit of a we like it in the sense that we know that one of the top teams is going to be around on the last day. It doesn't mean we're going to win it, but it really caters to the top teams that, it doesn't give those teams that want to come up through the ranks a ton of experience on how to get there. So it doesn't help the development of that next rank and file of teams to get through that event. And that's my biggest concern. But it's a tough province to figure out a different way because, you've got such an emphasis between rural and Winnipeg. It's not going to be fixed in my competitive lifetime, that's for sure.
Right. I mean, you make an interesting point about the round robin because, you see that at the Brier. You see teams, some of the younger teams that have come from Quebec, say, over the years, and then go once and go 5 and 6 and then come back and do better with that kind of experience. So I guess in the provincial level, it makes it's the same sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you take it further, take a look at the World Championships and how a team like a Lindholm, nothing away from them, but they play in that year in, year out. They get very, very comfortable with the format, and they get tons of experience. Eventually, they're going to win it, and you can't necessarily say the same thing with our format. It just doesn't afford somebody that.
One of the things I always have thought is interesting in Manitoba and good is that there are so many ways to qualify for that event, even though it is, like you say, you do qualify for a double knockout event versus some of the other provinces where it is basically zone play and then maybe a few extra spots. But you guys seem to have the Bonspiel and a lot of different ways, I guess, to get into it.
With a 32-team event,
right.
It's a huge thing for a lot of teams to get there the first time. I know some very, very, very good curlers that, are my age, and they've never been to a provincial. My take on it is, if you play and give yourself chances, you will qualify out here, and if you don't qualify, you really only have yourself to blame because it is 32 teams, and you have so many ways in. It's you can't ever stand back and blame the NCAA for not giving you chances to get in.
That's the first half of our interview with Jon Mead on The Curling Show, brought to you by Local 59 and their line of steel furniture, available at local59.com. Thanks for listening. Here's another spoonful of Black Pudding's twisted take on rock anthems. Ooh.